Ever had one of those days where everything goes so smoothly, you start to get suspicious? That was me, stepping into court for what I thought would be a routine hearing. I was representing a client in a contract dispute, a pretty standard case. We had our documents lined up, our arguments polished, and I was feeling confident. I'd been a lawyer for over a decade, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that preparation is everything. This case seemed like a slam dunk. The opposing counsel was known for being a bit green, and the facts were overwhelmingly in our favor. I'd told my client we were looking at a straightforward win, maybe a few hours of procedural back and forth, and then we'd be out. Boy, was I wrong. The courtroom was quiet, the usual low hum of anticipation in the air. The judge, a seasoned veteran named Judge Thompson, entered and took his seat. He was known for being sharp, no nonsense, but generally fair. He glanced at both me and the opposing counsel, his expression unreadable. "Counselors, please approach the bench," he said, his voice calm but firm. We walked up, and I expected him to set some ground rules for the hearing. Instead, he looked down at the file in front of him, then back up at us. "I've reviewed the motions and all submitted materials from both parties last night," he began. My heart skipped a beat. A judge reviewing everything in detail beforehand wasn't unusual. But the way he said it felt final, Mr. Davies, he said, looking straight at me. "Your argument rests on the interpretation of Clause 7B of the contract, correct?" I nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. We believe the language is clear and supports our client's position." He then turned to the opposing counsel. "And you, Miss Chen, contend that the clause is ambiguous and should be interpreted in favor of your client," she affirmed, looking a little nervous. I felt a surge of confidence. Her argument was weak. The clause was as clear as day. This was going exactly as planned. Judge Thompson leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen on the desk. The sound echoed in the silent courtroom. "Well, I've read Clause 7B about 20 times, he said, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. "And I've also read the precedent set in the 2018 case of Sterling versus Albright, which I'm sure you're both familiar with." My mind raced. Sterling versus Albright. Of course, I knew the case. It was a landmark ruling on contract interpretation. But it dealt with a very specific type of ambiguity that didn't seem to apply here. Or so I thought. I started to feel a small knot of unease forming in my stomach. What was he getting at? I quickly replayed the key points of that case in my head, trying to see the connection he was about to draw. The judge continued. "In Sterling, the court established that even seemingly clear language can be considered contextually ambiguous if it leads to a commercially absurd outcome." He paused, letting that sink in. Commercially absurd. The words hung in the air. He then looked directly at me. "Mr. Davies, if I were to rule based on your interpretation of Clause 7B, it would effectively bankrupt the defendant over a minor delivery delay. Given the nature of their business and the relatively small value of the initial contract, would you not agree that such an outcome is commercially absurd?" The knot in my stomach tightened into a solid rock. He had just taken my entire case, my perfectly prepared, ironclad argument, and turned it on its head with a single question. I was speechless for a moment. My mind was scrambling to formulate a response. He'd cut right through all the legal jargon and procedural layers to the heart of the matter. Fairness. I'd been so focused on the letter of the law, the precise wording of the contract, that I'd missed the bigger picture. I'd prepared for a fight on technicalities, but he had elevated the discussion to one of fundamental principle. I stammered, "Your Honor, with all due respect, the contract was signed by both parties." He cut me off, not unkindly. "I'm aware, Mr. Davies, but the law, and my role is not just to enforce text on a page. It's to ensure justice." Then came the final blow. He looked from me to Miss Chen. "I'm not going to waste the court's time with a lengthy hearing on this. Just on the precedent in Sterling versus Albright and my own reading of the contract in its full context, I am granting a summary judgment in favor of the defendant." He banged his gavel. "This court is adjourned," just like that. It was over. No arguments, no witnesses, no dramatic cross-examinations. The entire hearing, from start to finish, lasted less than 5 minutes. I stood there, my briefcase full of documents and my head full of useless arguments, completely stunned. My client looked at me, bewildered. The opposing counsel, Ms. Chen, looked as shocked as I was. She had just won, and I don't think she even knew how. We walked out of the courtroom in a daze. A client was understandably upset, asking what had just happened. All I could say was, "The judge made his decision. How do you explain to a client that you were completely outmaneuvered in under 5 minutes? How do you explain that a case you called a slam dunk just bounced off the rim and hit you in the face?" It was a humbling experience, to say the least. It was a brutal, swift, and incredibly effective lesson from a judge who clearly valued common sense and real-world consequences over legal gymnastics. I had been so focused on winning the battle, I didn't even see the war was already lost. That day taught me more than any law book ever could. It taught me that justice isn't always found in the fine print. Sometimes it's about looking at the entire situation and asking what is fair. It reminded me that a judge is not a robot just applying rules. They are human beings tasked with making difficult decisions. And sometimes, the most just decision is the one that happens the fastest. It was a painful loss, one of the most embarrassing moments of my career. But looking back, I'm grateful for it. It made me a better lawyer. It forced me to think beyond the text, to consider the human element in every case. And that's the thing about the legal system. Just when you think you have it all figured out, it throws you a curveball that reminds you to stay humble. It reminds you that the pursuit of justice is a complex, unpredictable, and deeply human endeavor. So the next time I walk into a courtroom, no matter how confident I feel, I'll always remember Judge Thompson in the 5-minute hearing that changed my perspective forever. It's a reminder that the quickest rulings are sometimes the most profound. Thanks for watching. And if you've had a similar experience where things took a completely unexpected turn, share it in the comments below. I'd love to read your stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. See you next time.